and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And joining me in just a minute is the one and only Alejandro Rojas. I might have an in-studio guest, Donnie Gosselin, might join us again, the former Boston police officer. I had a lot of people really enjoyed it last time he was in studio. So he said about 90% chance he might be crawling in here while we're doing the news. And so hopefully we'll see what happens. Our guest this evening is Mary Rodwell from Australia. And we're going to be talking about her new book and a lot more. And thank you for supporting the show. If you do, it's very easy if you're not a supporter to sign up for only $2 or more a month, and that's at podcastufo.com. We are live streaming on YouTube. A lot of people are really enjoying that, so you can check that out every Wednesday night at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's, again, on our website and on YouTube as well. You can find it there. So with that, I want to start the show, the UFO Updates with Alejandro. How are you?
I am good. How are you, my friend?
Things are going pretty well here in Maine.
That's good. That's really good to hear.
Yeah. Haven't fallen off any ladders or anything for a while, so...
Thank goodness. That seems to be one of your favorite pastimes.
Yes. I had a contractor here working on the roof, and he wanted me to come up and look at the roof, and I wouldn't do it. I'm just hoping it won't leak.
Take some pictures.
Yeah.
And text them to me.
Yeah, that's pretty safe. I'm going to be doing that.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad to hear that because, with your propensity to fall off of roofs and stuff, it's just better that you stay on the ground. And it's good. Yeah. Especially given this podcast that you do, that you stay grounded anyway.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. You're right about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's happening in the UFO news these days?
What's happening? So, I just want to mention this one story. It's not really news. It's nothing new, but there is some news. So last time I was on your show, we talked about this sighting where this person saw these orbs flying around, and there was a deer watching them.
Right.
And the deer was just kind of casually having a good time. And so that inspired Linda Zimmerman. You probably remember her. She's the author of a couple UFO books about UFOs in New York, one of those books being Hudson Valley UFOs. She contributes to our site occasionally, but that story inspired her to write a story about dogs and UFOs. So it's titled, Man's Best UFO Witness, ? And it's a great story of a lot of different stories she's compiled of dogs being part of UFO sightings, such as, dogs kind of freaking out prior to a UFO sighting, or that sort of thing. So it's a lot of fun, this thing that she's put together. So it's a great story. You can read it at openminds.tv. But, a really fun one.
That's great. I think a lot of Linda. She's actually coming on the show on the 7th of June. We'll have her on.
Cool.
Yeah, she's great. Absolutely great.
Yeah,
well-spoken.
She's really great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
I agree. Mm-hmm. So otherwise, we do the UFO headlines all of the time. So UFO News Daily Headlines, and you can find that on our front page. But one of them I wanted to talk about today is really interesting. This is from the Hindustani Times. and it's called Meet India's UFO Hunters. And it's an interesting story, mostly about a guy named Hitesh. Hopefully I'm saying his name right. But Hitesh Yadav is his full name. He's a 20-year-old tech student at Gurgaon College. I'm probably pronouncing all of that wrong, but he runs a free UFO online magazine called UFO Magazine, and he's founder of a group called Disclosure Team India. But it's an interesting story. So he got interested in UFOs when he was a kid, and his mom woke up at midnight, and she said she was petrified because she saw behind their home an alien, about 4 foot tall, a gray-skinned, same old thing with the big black eyes. She said it was like hovering in their backyard. Then it moved around and moved towards the door. And the family saw this. So Hitesh says he also saw it, and he remembers that the thing just vanished. And that was about 15 years ago. So he was really little. He's probably, 5 years old. But then I guess other people around their town and around this hospital, which is in their town of Panchkula, which is 10 kilometers away from Chandigarh. I don't know why that's significant. I'm guessing Chandigarh is, a more popular town. But anyway, they had seen this alien. So people since then have seen allegedly this alien, but they didn't really get freaked out. They felt that it was good luck to see it.
Wow.
And so that inspired him to get really involved and to start up this magazine and to start this research group that looks into UFOs. So it's it's not that small of a group, I guess. It's about 200 people. And so it's kind of cool. This Indian group that's looking into UFOs. So it's a great story that people can check out. And it tells a little bit more about some of the other members and how they work with MUFON and stuff like this. So really cool story. I love getting insight into UFO research groups in other countries.
Yeah, same here. Same here. We have a new blog writer from India. He's written a couple of really, really good blogs. Mm-hmm. Excellent research, does a lot of really great research. So I really didn't have an idea that there was a lot of people listening to the show from there, but there definitely are some.
Yeah, that's what's fun about podcasts is that you get these audiences from all over the world. And of course, Asia is really far away. India is really far away. But at the UFO Congress, we usually have at least a couple groups or at least a couple people from India that come from India all the way out here. I mean, we get people from all over the world, but India is one of those furthest countries. We usually have a couple from India, a couple from Japan, but it's always fun to talk to those guys. There was a guy who wanted us to try to help him do a UFO Congress in India, but that was just so difficult and expensive. I wish we could help him, but
that's something.
There's only one of me, man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. As far as you know, that is.
Yeah.
You might have a doppelganger out there. You never know.
It's entirely possible. I could be cloned by aliens and sent to this planet in order to get everybody ready for mass slavery by some sort of alien civilization. That's entirely possible. But if that is the case, it is not. It's totally subconscious. Okay. Of course, I could be getting the population also ready for some sort of enlightenment. That's probably even more likely. But
you might have something like the Manchurian Candidate thing going on.
Yeah. What if they turn me on and I just start talking alien and stuff? And
we were having trouble with Skype earlier. So you did sound kind of alien-like. Wow.
That's what you said. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. Is that it for the UFO news this week?
Yeah, that's what I got for today, if that's all right. I mean, there's a couple other just sightings that we always get. One of them was, which is pretty interesting, One of the Roger Marsh MUFON stories, of course, triangles yet again. And this was a guy in Savannah, Georgia. This was on April 25th at 9:45 p.m. Said he saw a couple enormous triangular-shaped objects floating in the air. So no pictures or anything, but you can see the account there at the website.
Excellent. All right, Alejandro, thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Donnie Gosselin did sneak in here. He's going to be co-hosting with me, and I will be right back after I set him up here, right after this quick music break. Well, here we are in the studio. Donnie, I think you have to lean. There you are. Thanks for showing up.
It's good to be here, Martin. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm sorry we both can't. I didn't have time to set the camera back, so we can't. You have to kind of lean in and say hi when you say hi. Let me just see if I can split it out a little bit better.
Hey, wow.
There we are. A little bit better.
There we go. Great.
Yeah. I'm way up high and you're down. It must be the chair. But anyway, thanks for being in the studio again. We're going to be contacting Mary Rodwell in just a minute.
Cool.
But I just thought I would say hi. And you just got done reading John Mack's book.
I did. I read Abduction, and now I'm probably halfway through Passport to the Cosmos.
Ah, yeah. How many, did he have more than those two books?
No, just those two. Unfortunately, he died in 2004. He was hit by a drunk driver over in London.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's some conspiracy about that, but I think he was just tired, and I just think what he did at that situation was just think that he was an American, looked on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, it happens. It really does. You've been over the UK. I mean, the first thing that you do is when you cross the street, you tend to look from where the traffic always comes from. Then you step out. And before you know it, you're on the roof of a cab. Yeah. No, so a lot of people are conspiratorial with that, but I think that's great that someone of his stature did what he did and took on such a topic, which we're actually going to be talking about today with Mary. She'll be on in just a minute about that. But I think, does he ever mention in either one of those books when he went to Africa? With those 60 children? Probably, it's briefly mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, in Abduction. And Passport to the Cosmos, as much as I've read, there are some references to that with respect to what interactions these children had with these beings.
Yeah. Now, Randy Nickerson is making a film. It's on our website. It's Ariel School. You'll see a banner on that. Ariel School incident, and I am going to follow up with him and see where he's at. He's been working on that film for 7 years. He has been, he's interviewed he's interviewed every child that was at that event that will be interviewed. In other words, there are some that just don't want to talk about it, but it's really something. I did get to meet Emily, who was one of them last year, and to actually talk to someone in person, that's to me is one of the most amazing encounters. I don't know if you've looked into that.
Yeah, I did. I did look into it, and it was fascinating in the sense that the children, almost every single one really mentioned the focus of the communication was on environmental disaster and things that were going to occur unless mankind started to think differently, think outside the box.
Right.
We continue on the same road that we're going.
Yeah.
There's not a good outcome.
Yeah. Donnie, just for the person that's in listening now that didn't get to hear you last time, your last name is Gosselin.
Right.
And you're a former retired Boston police officer.
That's right.
Hence the hat you're wearing.
Yeah, that's
Boston
right.
Strong.
Boston Strong, 617.
Yeah. So, but you've had an interest in the topic, and by the way, everyone, I live in the middle of nowhere in Maine, so it's amazing. But I live on right near the second largest lake in Maine, and you have a property there.
Yeah, we live about 5 minutes from each other.
Yeah. Well, you just it's your lake house, right? I mean, you also live.
I spend most of the time here.
Yeah, but you're also all over the place in other countries, and
yeah, I'm like Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere.
Yeah. But anyway, it's good to have you on, and so I'm going to, as we go along here, you just like tap my shoulder or something if you need to ask Mary a question, and we'll pull her into the interview now. So here comes Mary, and hold on, everyone, if you would. All right, it's ringing. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Martin.
Thank you. And here we are. We have traveled into the future. It is now Thursday morning. We do make it to Thursday morning in Australia. And thanks so much for being on the show. This is one. I can't do shows with anyone in the UK because it's in the middle of the night. But Australia is wonderful because it's like 10 o'clock in the morning for you there, right?
It's a perfect time for me because it's the best time in the day anyway, because the day goes on, I get very tired. So this is perfect. Good.
Not that you get tired, but good that this is perfect. So, Mary, for the listener, there are a lot of people that are pretty excited to have you on the show. For the listener that is not aware of what you have been up to, can you just give your background and how you basically got started into this whole topic?
Well, my background is I'm a former nurse midwife, and then I went into counselling about 30 years ago, private practice, where I worked with all sorts of issues that you normally get within counselling and human experiences, until about 20 plus years ago, a gentleman walked through the door and said, that for this there's no support groups, for this people just think you're crazy, and proceeded to tell me about the fact that he was aware that he was having experiences with extraterrestrials going up on spacecraft. And the thing that was compelling for me was it wasn't just him in the family that was experiencing it, it was his partner and the children. So this was a family affair. And fortunately, I'd read a couple of books on this subject, which enabled me at least to understand where he was coming from a little bit. And it was through reading Communion by Whitley Strieber, which everybody, I think, within the field knows about as one of the classics, and also a book by Dr. John Mack, the former professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who wrote Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, and then Passport to the Cosmos. So fortunately, I'd read a couple of books on this, so this enabled me to hear this gentleman, and that really started me on this road of trying to understand.
And are you actually involved in regression therapy as well? Or I've heard you talk about that.
Absolutely. Counseling is one aspect. The other aspect is that I did hypnotherapy probably about 15 years ago now. And I do regressions, not just for present life, but obviously past life, but also taking people into that space if they've had something like missing time through seeing a craft or thinking something's happened. I can take them back into that space and they can work out from in trance state what actually happened. And it's been extremely invaluable, no matter what people may think about hypnosis. What Dr. John Mack said, and I absolutely concur, is that when you take somebody into hypnosis, you're getting a far more accurate account of what's happened than often conscious memory, because your consciousness will edit things out that don't feel okay to you, whereas the subconscious doesn't edit anything. It just says it as it perceives it, like a blank tape. So you actually are getting something far more accurate than, as I say, in conscious memory. So it's very, very important as part of my work.
You know, I have a friend who does that, but I'd never heard it put the way you just did. So now I understand that your subconscious just lets things flow more freely, obviously, and you're not hindered by your conscious mind. So that is interesting. I always wondered what was the edge of hypnosis that made it work the way it does. And
well, it's interesting. The more I've worked in that space, is what is brilliant about it is that people can access awareness and understanding that they would never with their conscious mind, because they're always editing in their conscious mind. Whereas if you take them into that space and you can ask very profound questions, and you can ask them to access their subconscious, superconscious, and amazing wisdom can often come through that process because there are no filters. So it's a very valuable way of accessing information, and people do this through meditation, of course, and relaxation exercises as well.
I see. Now, the John Mack, that just came up. You mentioned it, and Donnie, who's joining me here in studio, is on to his second book, reading that now. What did you think of his work overall? I was just saying how impressed I was with someone with his stature, actually took on this topic and took it seriously. And I think that's really opened the doors for a lot of people.
Well, he certainly did for me. I actually met Dr. John Mack a few months before, tragically, he was killed in London. And what was wonderful about him, even though he came in as a skeptic, he was just open-minded. And what he discovered was, after doing all the psychological testing, and of course he had access to all of that anyway, he had no problem with understanding that they were perfectly sane. But what he did find was that they were often a lot more intuitive, a lot more aware, multidimensionally, if you have it. And when he used hypnosis, of course, he was finding out, as I am, far more of what goes on that is blocked to the conscious mind. And through it, became absolutely convinced this was not only a reality, that we could learn a great deal from those that had experiences.
Yes. Now, I was contacted last night from someone, and this happens now and then because of my show, my podcast, but I think they saw your name or whatever. I'm not really sure, but they somehow contacted me and said, I think I'm being abducted, I need help. So I have that information. And so when someone sends me something like that and needs help, what would you suggest I do? What would you do?
Well, for me, if someone contacts me, and this is on a daily basis with my work anyway, if it's Facebook or whether or not it's through my website or directly, is what I first do is send them out a questionnaire. And the reason for that is there are a lot of things with this experience. If somebody's questioning what is actually going on, and for many people, that's exactly, am I crazy or is this real? The questionnaire helps them put the pieces together a little bit, their jigsaw. And there are things that a lot of people don't know are related to this experience, but they are not aware that they are. So the questionnaire is more for them than for me. It allows them to, join the dots a little bit. And then I will find out what they feel they most need. For some, they just need more information. Others want to talk about it or want to share. Others want to explore more deeply. So it really is, my question to them then is, what do you most feel will be helpful? What do you most feel you need? And from that, we can work out the best way to help them.
Yes. Now, when someone fills out one of these forms, do you compare it? Do you compare it to like a body of work? Do you compare to the commonalities that they have?
Absolutely. For me, it's more the information than the identity ultimately, because what it's allowing me to do is seeing patterns of experience. Because a lot of these things are not as tangible as, we'd like them to be in 3D. We'd like everything to be very, very tangible, that, you can touch and feel the being, or you can touch the craft or whatever. But a lot of the time, their experiences are in an altered state. So they're questioning whether or not it's real, or was it a dream, or whatever. But there are a lot of things that now we're noticing as these patterns of the non-physical side of this experience, that are often it's in trance state, but there are changes and shifts in their awareness and abilities and their understanding that happen via the experiences. And I'm also part of another organization called the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, FREE. And what we're doing there is we're working with scientists, these are physicists, astrophysicists, psychology professors, therapists, researchers, MDs. And what we've done is put together 600 questions in our surveys. And so far, nearly 4,000 people have filled them out. And primary for that is getting the data, getting the information, and it's been absolutely profound what we're discovering. And there are things that are going to turn ufology on its head through what we're discovering through these surveys. And these are being made available. We've got statisticians actually looking at what this is showing us now. And the most important thing with this is that what we're discovering is the broad range of experiences that one way the scientists in FREE are exploring it through the quantum hologram model, so that we can actually understand how things like intuition, and paranormal experiences, clairvoyance, clairaudience, seeing energy, seeing spirits, precognition, all these things can be validated through the quantum hologram. And so there we have a model that will allow us to understand how people have these experiences and give them a tangibility, even though it's not ground traces or marks on the body or implants or photographs of the beings. It's actually showing how experiences literally affect individuals after their experiences.
Mary, you mentioned the survey, and it's a rather lengthy survey as you described it. What measures do you take as a researcher to ensure that that the questions contained in the survey don't corrupt the answers of the person, or maybe plant ideas in the person's mind that maybe they would elaborate on during a hypnosis session?
I think it's an extremely good question, and I'm not the expert here in the sense that this has been a collaboration between those working in the field. We've got Dr. Bob Davis, who's a neuroscientist, who's part of he's co-chair of the survey. We've got Dr. Klimo, who is a professor of psychology and parapsychology for 40 years. Those two are actually putting, with the help of researchers like myself and others, the questions are very much in the open-ended questions, so that people have the freedom to say and understand without anything being leading. They're very, very aware of that. Just in the same way I am as a counselor, you don't ask leading questions. You reflect whatever they're saying to you, and you give them the freedom to actually explain their experiences. And this has been, quite an enormous task to actually create questions that allow the person to share what's happening to them. And these are the conscious recall, by the way. These are not through hypnosis. Our further 2 surveys, one of them is going to be covering far more of the paranormal and things like they've discovered through hypnosis or whatever. But the whole idea is finally to create a way of explaining this academically to the mainstream, so that this gets some credibility. This has been our aim all along. And what really we're doing is we're exploring a way to understand consciousness, not just extraterrestrial encounters, because we know some of them are interdimensional, extra-dimensional, and we also know that people have these experiences if they've had a near-death experience. In fact, 40% of those surveyed had near-death experiences that enabled them to then start accessing these non-human intelligences. So for them, it wasn't a UFO craft or being taken up in a craft. It was through their near-death experience, and that was a catalyst, if you like, for awareness or an ability to access more of the matrix that allowed them then to start to interact with these beings. Others, it will be a shamanic waking up call, if you like, or a Kundalini awakening. So there are many different ways people are accessing this realm and beginning to contact these non-human intelligences. So it's not just about the UFO ET one standard abduction. And interestingly, only about 20% believe they've been abducted. The rest are actually saying that this was for them, something that they've welcomed, and that's something that they are participating in. And this is, again, turning everything we know on its head, because we've always thought, oh, you know, this is without people's choice, without their consent. And what we're discovering is that a majority, it's actually the reverse of that. So this is really fascinating data that we're getting, and it's done in a way that will cover all the traditional mandates that you need to look at, so that there is no question that we are leading those that are answering the question. And it's all anonymous, by the way. No, there is no identity with this needed. It's all about the data.
Wow. Now, when you say with their consent, how do they give their consent, or how is that discovered?
It may be conscious. They may be already aware that they've had an agreement with the beings or the intelligences. But it's also come through in hypnosis. One of the questions that I ask, amongst many others, while they're in that space is, have you, on any level, consented to this experience? And for some, it's yes, before I came here. As a soul, I've agreed to this experience, because many of them see themselves connected to these beings, these visitors, and they will see that that connection means that they've sort of, if you like, decided to come in from that source or that origin of those beings in physical form or in human form because of the human experience. And some of them even, recall going and meeting up with these beings and basically telling them what it's like to be human, what happens on this planet. So there's this kind of interfacing going on where these beings are understanding how it works for us in human form, in our human containers. So this is really quite revelationary as far as most people understand that there is a cooperation with many, many people having these experiences. And I'm working with even the small children. And my book, The New Human, there's 9 chapters of children under 10 telling me how the star visitors, as they call them, or their family, and they've come from that origin to come in human form with awareness so that they can tell their family what it's like, and they will actually communicate and interface with them. And these are children, as young as 4 or 5 or 6, saying, you're not my real parents. My parents are in space. You're just here to look after me. And this is a pattern of, many, many children that have told their parents this, and the parents writing to me. And I've even talked to these children, and they'll say, oh, yes. 2 days ago, I was talking to a 9-year-old here in Australia telling me that his other mother, from where he comes from, helps him understand this planet. And he tells her what's going on and what he understands, and told me quite consciously he's aware of choosing his parents before he came onto this planet, and basically told his mother that, that I chose you as I came in human form. So he remembers before he even came here where he's from.
Now, there's never been any television show or anything like this that the kids could be exposed to. I mean, what would the skeptics say about something like that?
Well, the interesting thing for me is when you're talking to children under 10, even with all the cartoons with aliens on it and what have you, you don't get certain concepts coming up that are complex concepts that these children will have discussed with me. For example, one 8-year-old was describing being taken to a planet at night with a being which she described that took her and was teaching her how to levitate, how to use her third eye, and also showing her genetic engineering, saying she was shown how they do genetic engineering with different species, different animals, different plants, for example, and going into detail about this. This is not something you're going to get on a cartoon or anything. And how this 8-year-old also told me that when she was brought back, the craft cloaked itself so it wasn't seen by anyone around when they brought her back, for example. Another 8-year-old told me that she was taken by a craft right to see a black hole and what it was like in the black hole, where she was seeing planets exploding and coming back together again, including taking her inside a wormhole, where she was seeing in almost real time things like dinosaurs and this kind of thing. Now, these aren't concepts that the average 8-year-old has any notion of. And, you know, I've had 3 children, I've got 5 grandchildren, and they're not concepts that they would come out with as part of their experience, whatever they've seen on television or whatever.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that is some really strange things to come up with. In the chat room, Phil wanted to know what exactly is quantum holograph?
Oh, the quantum hologram.
A hologram, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, this is a model of reality that astrophysicists and physicists talk about. And please don't ask me to go into detail other than the fact that I understand that everything is like we are, if you like, within a hologram of consciousness. And basically that connects us all. And this hologram of consciousness is what we're interacting with, both through our conscious 3D, but our multidimensional awareness as well. So that, for example, things like intuition, clairvoyance, all those what we call paranormal are really parts of our ability. We don't always use them, we don't always trust them, because for many people, they're afraid that if they do that, there's something, they'll probably go a bit crazy or whatever. But what it really is, part of our nature to be, if you like, multidimensional. And what you can do when you access that side of yourself, that's when when you get the sense your friend's going to ring you, or you get a sense when you're going down the road that something's going to happen and you better be careful. Those kinds of feelings and knowings and senses come from your multidimensional self and from the hologram. So basically it's like saying a hologram of consciousness is what we are part of. And this is the way that the scientists now are coming to understand it. But if you want to know its complexity, then you need to go on to some of the websites of the physicists as they explain it in more detail. That's as much as I can possibly explain to you. But I know from the experiences that people have that that's what we're doing. We're accessing another aspect of our multidimensional awareness when we're tapping in to those feelings, those knowings, those senses, because all of those actually we all have, but many of us shut them down because we're afraid to trust them. And yet often it's far better to trust that than your logic or your analytical mind.
Mary, I'd like to ask you just to follow up on the 80% consensual number, which seems to be pretty much in line with what Dr. Mack reported in his first book, which really, for me, was a game changer, because I had always thought of this phenomenon as I understood it at the time, to be something that was completely against one's own wishes. But 80%, according to Dr. Mack, and now we're hearing it from you as well, claim that this is some sort of consensual experience. But I'd like to kind of mine a little bit of this whole consensual experience. Is there some prototypical experience that they have that seems to be common among all the consensual people? In other words, is this some sort of what Dr. Mack kind of referred to on many different occasions with this 80% consensual, is that there was some sort of communication with respect to environmental disasters and things that needed to be avoided in order to ensure that humanity continues. Did you, in your research and the people that you attend to, do you see this sort of communication occurring?
Absolutely. Excuse me. One of the things we've discovered is 85% found their experiences transformative. And by that, it means they've changed their whole paradigm through the experience, and everything that they've ever accepted as a truth in their 3D educational conditioning and programming often now becomes a question. But one of the things they notice from the experience, and many of them have said this, that all life becomes precious. That some of them say, I can't even stand on an ant now. I can't see the pain and on this planet. I can't cope with the aggression. I can't cope with the war. Some of them become environmentalists, where they know that they almost think it's like their mission, that they have got to do something now to protect the planet. They become very, very aware of that kind of thing, and they'll get involved and become quite activist in it. Many of them want, more rural, holistic lifestyles. They change their diet. Many of them become vegetarian. Others want to be healers and want to support one another. They lose total interest in materialistic values, no longer interested in generating any kind of, funds or whatever other than survival and what have you. So it's literally everything within their framework is altered and changed. And this is the transformative side that I'm fascinated by, because, when everybody says to me, what's their agendas? What is it that they're, what are they doing this for, and all the rest of it? Without doubt, the 85% are saying that it is about shifting the consciousness of the human from one of far more blinkered awareness of the 3D reality, and showing them that they're multidimensional, but also showing them how we're connected to everything, that everything, that we are part of a consciousness, if you like, that also is part of what these beings are, because the way that they communicate most often is through telepathy. And my sense is that when you're getting people becoming more sensitive, more aware, more empathic, many of them start to feel this communication with these beings on a telepathic basis. And what I've also discovered is a lot of the children that are being born now, what I call the new upgrades of children, are being born telepathic. And I've had parents write to me. I recall an email only recently of a woman telling me her 3-year-old daughter had been telepathic since birth, and she said, my biggest problem, Mary, is that she not only reads my mind, but those around us as well. And she said, and it's, she's 3 years old, I have to watch my thoughts all the time because she knows what I'm thinking. She's not the only one. We're discovering now a lot of these children that the parents write to me about or talk to me, they say that they have the ability to tap into thoughts and emotion and feelings, and they are hypersensitive. And these are the new programs that I talk about, the new humans, are these very aware upgrades, as I call them, and I talk about them in my presentations. And these new upgrades are being recognized by a number of individuals within different professions. And I know 2 molecular biologists that talk about these new upgrades. One of them is in Sweden, Dr. Olsen, and she talks about the letter people, the new human, the quantum. And these are often diagnosed or labeled as ADHD or Asperger's or dyslexic or some forms of autism, but actually they are experiencing a far more broader version of reality, a multidimensional reality. And that is why they appear dysfunctional, because they're already operating from that level rather than the 3D, the older models like myself are operating from. So they struggle, and that's the reason they struggle. And one gentleman who found he was diagnosed as ADHD when in his 50s, Neil Gold, who's a ufologist in Hong Kong, wrote a book, Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind, and he changed ADHD to always dialed into higher dimensions, because he'd always seen reality differently, even from a small child. And a lot of these children that are being diagnosed as ADHD are actually, I believe, new programs that are getting us into a more aware species, or becoming a more aware species.
Now, it seems to be like almost 2 schools of thought. One is that we were hybrid as we were seated here, in ancient times. And then, so in that case, What are your thoughts on that? First of all, I should ask you. Do you think that's what possibly happened to the human race instead of evolution or partial evolution, and combined with that?
Absolutely. I've actually got a whole chapter on the DNA where I've tapped into this whole area, because I think it's really important that people understand a little bit more of the anomalies that have been found in human DNA. And as I mentioned, a whistleblower geneticist that was in Lloyd Pye's book who explored all the information on the Star Child's skull, and he wrote the book The Intervention Theory, and in it he's got a whistleblower statement from a geneticist basically stating that we're hybrids, that he knows and can see in our DNA where we've been spliced and various things. He said it's absolutely as obvious as anything, but if you dare to try and say this, you'd be hung out to dry. But this is being noted. And the other thing that's fascinating to me, and it's already there, that you've got Cro-Magnon and you've got the Neanderthal, then you've got what's called the missing link, and then suddenly you have Homo sapiens sapiens, who's twice the brain size, for example, and 223 genes that that were a sideways insertion of genetic material that are all to do with higher psychological functioning, suddenly being part of who we are as well. And you have those that have interactions with ETs that say, and are being told by the ETs, that they have put their DNA with our DNA, for example. So everything, and even Francis Crick, co-founder of the DNA molecule, in his book Life Itself, was saying the same thing. He said we were seeded from the stars. He was also saying they, did certain things until we get ready to be more evolved. So we've been, if you like, dumbed down because some of our genes are not switched on yet. They only say that we use 5% of our DNA and the rest is some kind of junk litter. But what I'm finding is that there's part of that now that these experiences are telling us that is being switched on, being activated, and this is why more and more people are becoming more aware, becoming more multidimensionally aware, because that part of their DNA is being activated, and they're relating more and more to these extraterrestrials that have put something in the human DNA, and they will say, well, I feel I'm from the Pleiades, or I feel I'm from Arcturus, or whatever. But what they're doing is, what I believe is happening, that part of their ET DNA is being activated, and that's why they start to feel their connections to these species that are visiting us from all over the galaxy.
So why wouldn't, a couple of things on that, why would they have waited so long to activate that part of their DNA? That's one of the questions. And the other one is, we'll just answer that part first, if you would.
Well, I don't know the mind of these intelligences that are working with us, but what seems to have happened is that we've been allowed to evolve in the way that most, from what one 8-year-old told me, they do this in other galaxies and other universes. They see planets and they wait and allow them to evolve in their own way. My understanding is that because now we are becoming spacefaring species, and because we have technology now that is destructive, there is a great fear of what we will do with it before we become aware that we're part of a galactic community. And so the way I describe it, from what I understand, is that if you give a 3-year-old a loaded gun and they don't realize that it can kill people, you're in trouble. So you've got to upgrade the child and give it the maturity to understand what it's dealing with. And this is what I think is going on at the moment. There's a fast, exponential upgrade program going on, and this is why these new children are so aware and activated, because they know how it works. They're already interfacing with these beings which they see as part of their family, their star family in many, many cases. And so they're coming in with these abilities and awareness, which is helping us as we learn from them. And this is what's happening. A lot of the parents are learning from the kids, that we are part of a consciousness, but also part of a galactic community. And we need to grow up and take responsibility for, what we're doing. And this is part of this exponential increase now in this activation that's going on. Certainly it's part of it. It's probably not all of it at all, but it's certainly coming out in, I've worked with over 3,000 individuals globally, and the parents and the children that are coming up. And this is what's coming out of this, is why they are so much more aware, because they're basically helping us to grow up and mature spiritually, psycho-spiritually, if you like, in a way that we can interact in a healthy, balanced, and less aggressive way with our galactic neighbors, if you like.
Now, when did you notice that these children were coming forward and talking to their parents? How long ago would you say that you know that this had started?
Oh, look, I think that there's been upgrades been going on for possibly the last 100 years. And the older generations had these abilities, but often they were squashed because they were told it wasn't real and not to believe it. But the interesting thing is that almost each generation from that has been able to just be that little bit more aware, or at least to honor some of it. I was talking to a 79-year-old lady in Norway, and I spoke about the new children and their abilities. And she said to me, she came up to me afterwards and said, "You're the very first person in my life that is actually spoken about all the abilities that these new children can do." She said, "I've been able to do it all my life. I could call the sheep in with my mind and nobody knew how I did it." But she said, "I'd never heard of anyone else being able to do it." I think what's happened is that with the upgrades of these each generation, more and more of the parents have been more accepting because they've experienced it, but have not known what to do with it or how to understand it. But because of the internet, because there's information going out there now, more and more are recognizing this in their children. And instead of telling them, "Don't be silly," when you say you're seeing a little blue being or you're seeing a little green being and they're taking you up on a spaceship, they're not telling them anymore, "Don't be silly, don't talk about it," as they may have experienced from their parents. Stop talking about this. It's just your imagination. Don't be silly. Because these parents are allowing their child to say, "Look, this is what I experienced," because in their heart they know that this is a reality as well because they've experienced it. You're hearing more and more now, and people are approaching me. I'm getting emails from parents from all over the globe telling me what their young children are saying and how they understand their reality and that they're not from here. And that some of them say, "Look, I just want to go home. I don't like this planet very much." And the parents relate to it because that was how they felt when they were young kids, but it was squashed or conditioned out of them or programmed out of them. And so they're saying, "But I don't want to do that with my children." So there have been waves and generations of upgrades slowly coming to the point where now we've got children being born that are fully awake to who they are, why they've come, with the abilities, you'd call them psychic abilities, intuition, telepathy, precognition, ability to a certain telekinetic abilities, for example. So they've got all these kinds of what, were considered gifts, but it is natural to them. And the only time that they'll stop doing it is if they're told it's not okay. And if they're told it's not okay, then they will stop doing it and they will dumb it down.
I come from a background of forensic science, and as a police officer and also as a lawyer, we talk a lot about evidence. We talk a lot about circumstantial evidence, physical evidence, all these different types of things that tend to prove that a certain thing is real. And that's why, quite frankly, I've come to the subject very reluctantly and very skeptically, and I still maintain some level of skepticism. But having said that, what I read in Dr. Mack's book is what I found, what I got out of it really, was that there was a series of anecdotal evidence that came to light, but it was remarkably similar across different people who had never communicated with one another. And I still have to say that I remain skeptical about this, but I have an open mind. But let me ask you this. What is it about this, and I'm sure you approached this when you first became aware of it with a healthy dose of skepticism. What is a particular case that you have treated, or a person that you have interviewed that kind of changed your worldview on this. Can you give us some particulars on that?
Oh gosh, there are so many. I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and I'm an ex-nurse midwife. I deal with a lot of tangibility in that reality and what have you, and I really wanted to be clear that I wasn't getting carried away. And you say you're open-minded, and I'm open-minded, but like you, it doesn't equate to gullibility. What I have done with not only with the adults but with the children too is seeing where their information can be corroborated, for example, as much as possible, and also try and see if I can find information through science, through other knowledge that may corroborate their information as well. Very, very important. And I think, everyone should look at it from both angles, because you need to be able to have something tangible here with it. But I'll tell you something that was really quite fascinating. And it's to do with the children again, because if I get information from one child, I may very well see if I can get similar information from another and see if it's the same kind of information. And this involves two young girls. One was 7 and one was 8. And the one family, the mother and the daughter had both the experiences, and the daughter had got a symbol that she was shown on a craft. When she visited, she said she was taken to Mars. And this symbol she had drawn, and she said, I have a bit of an understanding of it, but I'd like to know if anyone else has seen this symbol. So I took the drawing, and I also knew of another young lady with the whole family had experiences, and this was in the US. These families obviously have never communicated, and this is really very important. And I sent the symbol, and I said, does any of the children, and one was 12, a little boy, and one was an 8-year-old girl, and I said, have seen this symbol or have any idea of it or any sense of what it is? And what was absolutely fascinating was the little girl said, yes, I've seen it when I was on a spaceship when they took me to Mars, and it means this, this, and this. And so it was absolutely fascinating, because I sent the information from that family back to the first the girl and her mother, and the little girl said, yes, that was exactly what they told me. Now, this was just one symbol where there was no front loading, there was no information where she'd seen it, how she understood it, or anything. It was primarily, have you ever seen this, from the father, who was very clear. He's an engineer, and he was very clear that there was absolutely no front loading. So you get things like that going on, which can be quite amazing in the sense of how would that happen. I have also talked to children about their experiences on the craft and what they've understood, and I've had adults say the identical things about how they're being taught, how things are holographic, how they use their mind to create things. So many have talked about being shown how to use their mind flying craft, that the craft is conscious, for example. And a lot of these people, it's the very first time they've ever shared this. And I always remember, and this was really profound for me, it was a 59-year-old man. He was an Australian man, and he rang me up one day and said, I've had experiences where I think are extraterrestrial, but I want to know a little bit more. And I sent him the questionnaire. He phoned me back in tears. He was so emotional, and he said to me, how do you know about my life? Because everything he'd read in that questionnaire resonated with him to such a profound degree, it shocked him. And he said, I've never spoken about this to anyone. Nobody knows this is my experience. This is the first time that I've ever even explored it. So you get those kinds of reactions from people, and it leaves you in no doubt that how profound this is for them. And yes, many have the tangible marks on the body. Some have had implants taken out, and Dr. Roger Leir did some wonderful pioneering work. And I mean, he was a good friend of mine, and he's taken out a number of the implants, knowing through his investigations that there were things about them that couldn't be explained. There were compositions of them that didn't look they came from this planet. Some of them were highly magnetized, etc. So you've got this. You've got people that find themselves outside with no clothes on and all the doors locked. Children, adults, having to knock.
Well, we lost her on Skype just then, and so I figured it's a pretty good time to end the show for the first hour. So if you'd like to, we did get her back, of course, and ended up being a great 2-hour show. And if you'd like to support the show to hear hour 2, the whole show, plus all the archives, all you have to do is go to our website, podcastufo.com. And for $2 or more a month, you can listen to all the shows, plus the Everything Else show as well is in that podcast feed. Our guest next week is John D'Souza. He's a former FBI agent. Should be a good show. So thanks so much for listening, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.